Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is CJ, the Populist New Yorker, and today we're going to be analyzing the 2021 red wave that occurred the other day back on November 2nd and ultimately really trickled down not just from Virginia or New Jersey, but also on the local level as well. And Democrats lost many key local races, particularly here in my home state of New York. So we're going to be taking a look at all of those things. But first, we want to take a look at Biden's job disapproval. Currently, it's at 53% to 37%, nearly 20 points underwater. Now, civics, it's really difficult to measure approval because 538 is going to give you very different numbers than civics. So naturally, I think that the real approval of Joe Biden is probably somewhere in the middle of these two. So probably the low 40s, disapproval in the low 50s. And then, of course, you have a group of undecideds as well. But 2021 was a very rough year for Democrats. Just the fall. This fall has been really bad. But earlier on, Democrats were doing pretty well in 2021. They won the Senate in the two Georgia runoff elections. They did really well in the New Mexico special election, and they did super well in the California recall election. But it seems as now, as gas prices have continued to go up, as we've had shortages, Biden's failure to get his agenda passed, these things have all kind of culminated in what we saw on November 2nd, which was a over 12-point swing in states like New Jersey and even in Virginia, and a similar swing in New Jersey, which was terrible news for the Democratic Party. If we take a look at Virginia, for instance, a lot of these suburban counties, if we look at the shift from 2020, moved, on average around 12 points. Some counties moving as dramatically as 16 points, like Emporia, independent cities. Radford City, 18 points more Republican. And then even the more rural counties were not maxed out yet. These numbers that Glenn Youngkin got in Trump counties, 79% in Bedford County. We can compare that to 2020. Trump was able to only get 73%. So even in areas where people thought Republicans were maxed out, the Republican base proved to them that, places like Tazewell County, Lee County can still get redder than they were in 2020. And ultimately, we saw the biggest shift in the urban crescent here, this part of Virginia, which is the main reason why the state has been anchored for the Democrats for over a decade. Hampton Roads, this area, a lot of the counties that Joe Biden won in 2020 flipped from red to blue. Counties like Stafford, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, James City County, Northampton County, even Chesterfield. Northampton County wasn't a flip, but the other ones were. Those all flipped back in 2021 by pretty remarkable margins. Stafford County by 11 points. Virginia Beach, Glenn Youngkin's home city, by 8. Chesapeake by 6. Northampton went, about a little bit over a point. This is a closer margin than what it was before. So it really goes to show you as more of the votes kind of trickle in a bit, these totals are going to change a bit. So maybe by the end of this, Northampton will be blue. I doubt it at this point. There would need to be a lot of votes coming out. So these aren't really the final results, but this is pretty close to what we're going to see in the final numbers. And we've just seen incredible shifts in the suburbs. Chesterfield County going back toward the Republicans, an 11-point shift. Even Richmond City, which is a very blue city, Biden won 82 to 14. McAuliffe was only able to win this 77 to 19. And part of that was due to the fact that Princess Blanding, the Liberation Party candidate, was from Richmond. But this goes just beyond Virginia. And Virginia is the main focal point of the headlines when it comes to this red wave. But there really was a red wave that goes less reported. And of course, that's in the state of New Jersey. Now, New Jersey isn't totally in either. But at the end of the day, it looks like Murphy is probably going to win by 2.5 to 3 points, I predict, when this is all said and done. And this is a tremendous improvement on the 2020 election margins that we saw back last November. So last year, of course, Joe Biden won the state of New Jersey 57 to 41. Of course, now Chitterelli, the Republican, has 48% of the vote to Phil Murphy's 50.8% of the vote. So a gigantic shift. But ultimately, this was a low turnout election. This was an election where only 1.2 million voters roughly from either party came out. So proportionally, more Republicans came out, but still, you have 1.8 million Trump voters in the 2020 election that did not come out in 2021. And a big reason I think that happened was because of the polling. The polling in New Jersey was very bad for Chitterelli. He was only getting 44, 42, 41, 39%. Obviously, at the end, the polls got a little closer. But most voters in New Jersey, I reckon even most Republican voters, did not think this race was going to be close at all. And it turns out that it was a pretty close race. And I think had we seen more accurate polls like we did in Virginia, I think Republicans probably would have been more energized to come out and actually vote because, I mean, myself included, I didn't think New Jersey was going to be that close this election. You know, I thought it was going to be about a 10-point margin or an 8-point margin maybe, which would still be a big improvement over Joe Biden's 16-point margin. That would be halving the margin. But now we're looking at a margin that's less than a quarter of what Joe Biden was able to muster in New Jersey. And he was able to do that because he ran up the margins big in traditionally red counties, and he was able to flip a lot of South Jersey. A lot of these South Jersey counties, Atlantic County, Cumberland County, Gloucester. Gloucester's kind of a swing county. Trump won it last time. But specifically, Atlantic and Cumberland County shifted in big ways toward Jack Chitterelli, so much so that Atlantic County went plus 12 Republican, going from a county that went to Joe Biden by around 7 points, plus 12, so that's almost a 20-point shift. Cumberland County, a similar margin, and even Ocean County, only getting 31% of the vote for Jack Chitterelli. Biden was able to get 34. So that was probably the county where we saw the least amount of shift, just because it's already such a red county. You can only max out votes so much there. But of course, the northwestern part of the state, Sussex, Warren, and Hunterdon counties came in strong. And of course, Morris County flipped in a big way. This is a county that Biden won back in 2020, 51-46, and it looks like Chitterelli is on track to win it by around 12 points. So overall, Chitterelli overperforming on average about 7 or 8 points over Trump's margins in the states, even overperforming in places like Hudson County, Essex County, in these areas. And it's because of a number of factors. Obviously, Biden's approval plays a big factor in this, but there are also local issues at play too. Obviously, COVID fatigue, many people tired of Democratic policies on mandates and things like that really energize the Republican base. And even though those positions might not be popular statewide, they're a big enough factor that they turn out the Republican base in strong numbers to support Chitterelli. And Chitterelli didn't really get the national recognition that Glenn Youngkin was getting toward the end of his campaign. Yet this goes to show you how much the down ballot effect is really going to impact local races. So obviously in the New Jersey State Senate and Assembly, I believe there were gains in both chambers for the Republicans, and I expect those numbers to kind of widen as we get more votes. But certainly, and like Virginia as well, this trickle down is going to have long-term consequences on state policy. Obviously, New Jersey is going to come out of this election a little less blue than it was before, and Virginia is going to come out of this election with almost a Republican trifecta, going from a Democratic trifecta the first time they'd had that, I believe, since 1993 or the early 90s, and they're going to come out of this election with almost returning to a Republican trifecta. And, this goes to a lot of local issues. Criminal justice was a large issue. Many Republicans capitalizing on what they saw as soft on crime Democratic policies like bail reform. That played a huge role in the Long Island local elections, which I'll talk about at the end of this video. And also, Virginia, Glenn Youngkin made a huge deal about the parole board that was letting off a lot of criminals early off their offenses, kind of as he saw, giving them a slap on the wrist. And that really energized a lot of suburban voters in particular to come out and rebuke the Democratic Party for taking these more left-wing cultural and social positions. Many people in the media will tell you that this was because the Democrats were pursuing a strong economic agenda. And while I think there's some truth to that, I think the main backlash is mostly on the Democrats' cultural movement toward the left. Issues like critical race theory or just the teaching of race in school, the controversial methods of which it is taught in schools, doesn't vote over well with suburban parents. And we saw that come out in force, not just Virginia, but also in New Jersey. New Jersey, and in New York as well. So New York also had some pretty significant local races. Local races, again, have huge ramifications long term. Now, the New York City mayoral race was pretty disappointing for the Republican Party, but it was pretty expected. New York City is one of the most Democratic cities in the entire nation. Actually, I take that back. In terms of large cities, New York is actually more moderate, but obviously it is a big liberal city with, a D plus 50 advantage on average. So Curtis Sliwa, well known among many New Yorkers, unfortunately couldn't overcome the partisan registration gap. There were, too many Democrats fell in line and voted for Eric Adams. Curtis Sliwa was at a big fundraising disadvantage, even though I think he had a pretty palatable message for New York voters. Obviously, it was, of course, to the right of them, and it was a resounding rejection. But I think other candidates probably would have fared worse. But I think fundraising was a huge problem for Curtis Sliwa in getting his message out. But when it comes to the down ballot races, the Republican ballot measures, Proposal 1, 3, and 4, rather the Republican positions on those ballot measures, all failed, as of right now, by pretty big margins for a blue state. Now, obviously, I expect these margins to narrow up as they do. Obviously, they're counting more mail-in votes. Those always lean Democratic. So by the end of the day, these proposals might pass by maybe fail by 5 or 6 points, but they have been called. The redistricting process proposal, which would have made it easier for Democrats to gerrymander the state, failed by 12 points as of right now. Allow the legislature to pass same-day voter registration failed by a pretty wide margin, and same-day no excuse absentee voting also failed as well. So the Republican positions on the ballot measures failed. That was mainly due to a huge turnout effort that was going on among Republicans, not just on Long Island, but across the entire state. And Long Island in particular, which I think is significant because Long Island is suburban, very suburban, some of the oldest suburbs in the entire country. In 2020, Suffolk County and Nassau County, which comprise of what most New Yorkers consider Long Island, they went to Joe Biden. Now, Suffolk County didn't go to Joe Biden, but when you average the two together, Long Island as a whole voted for Joe Biden by a pretty sizable margin. And that's reflective of suburban counties we've seen all across the country, in places like Pennsylvania, Texas, even Ohio, the suburbs trending to Biden. But what we saw the other night was a repudiation of those gains. And, the GOP's focus on education, schooling, the fact that so many kids have been out of school because of COVID, really energized Republican voters, particularly just parents, to vote for the Republican Party in numbers that they haven't voted for them in decades. We haven't seen a red wave like this since 2009, and 2009 was an even bigger red wave than this, but it was a slightly less partisan time where we saw Virginia and New Jersey both flip, and here on Long Island we saw Republican gains as well. So bail reform was the key issue on Long Island, and is a big issue among New York Republicans. It led to the Republican District Attorney of Nassau County, the candidate winning by 20 points over the Democratic opponent as of right now. If we look at the other results out of New York, the same thing happened in Suffolk County. Incumbent Democratic District Attorney lost his race as of right now, 57-43. And even a county executive in Nassau County, which really I just think was due to the down ballot effect. Laura Curran was a pretty popular county executive in Nassau County, but she ended up losing as of right now by around 4 points. That margin is probably expected to narrow up when all the votes are counted. But Blakeman, who is the Republican challenger, looks like he's going to unseat her. He's already declared victory. And even Laura Curran's campaign says it is very, very hard for them to make up the votes they need to win. So I think even the down ballot effect, people just voting straight Republican, had local ramifications. And I'm sure Long Island was not the only place. This happened upstate as well. Upstate Republicans won by massive margins as well in county executive races, town supervisor races. Obviously, in very Democratic towns, we didn't see this, but Oyster Bay and Nassau County, a fairly Republican town, but a 72-28 margin is very excessive. Same with Smithtown, 75-25. So all across Long Island, all across the country, and Long Island I just used as an example because it's where I live, but you've seen down ballot ramifications in Minneapolis. Of course, we saw the the abolish the police question on the ballot fail 56-44, which is pretty resounding for a city as extremely liberal as Minneapolis. But this wasn't even the only big victory. Seattle, of course, which I don't know if they have on here, but in the city of Seattle, there was a district attorney who won there, who is a Republican, who beat a Democrat who supported, fully abolishing the police, turning it into like a safety department or something. And it looks like she won by around 20 points or so. So all across the board, this was basically almost the best outcome Republicans could have hoped for. Obviously, if New Jersey had flipped, that would have been a tremendous win. But nonetheless, this still was a red tsunami that has ramifications on the Biden administration. Really is a rebuke. This is basically the 2009 of our decade. And we're likely to see the 2022 midterms be once again a pretty strong rebuke of the Democratic Party in Washington. And I will be releasing my updated Senate prediction and governor's predictions in the next couple of days on that. So anyway, guys, thank you all for watching this video. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss any new videos I put out. And again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.